In part one, we discovered that Digby, that 1983 300D, was missing on 2 cylinders, badly missing. It wasn't firing at all. And upon doing a quick compression test, we were scratching our heads wondering, well, is that the problem? Is compression the reason it wasn't firing? Well, if you recall, number 5 had 300 psi and number 3 had 220 psi. Now, both of those are what you would consider lower compression, particularly 220. But it's not low enough to not make the engine not fire if it's delivering fuel properly, okay? Now, right away, you notice I didn't do a complete compression test. That wasn't the purpose of that video. I just want to do a quick one to kind of give me an idea of why this engine was misfiring. Now, if I had 50 pounds or 0 or 100, then I could assume something was wrong, really wrong with compression, and the next step would be to do a valve adjustment. Don't assume just because you have bad compression that it's going to be pistons or worn cylinder wall wear or even burnt valves. It could be the valves are not completely closing. So I've always said before you do a compression test, you do a valve adjustment, but in this case, I wasn't looking for that. I was just trying to do some quick diagnostics. And so now I'm thinking, well, what is really wrong here? And I had a little clue when I took the injector line off number 3. And I looked down into the very end of the fuel injector and I saw rust. I saw rust down there. Now, what is rust doing in diesel fuel? Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. So I'm very suspicious about the fuel injectors. I also looked at the tips, and if you look here, you can see this tip on number 3 that came out of Digby is very weird. It does not even showing a seal for the crush washer. It's all black. Now take a look at this other injector. This is typically what you would see when you remove a fuel injector from a diesel if it's firing and burning properly. So there's something not quite right. Now I went around to the back of the car and I saw something on the trunk that may have given me a clue what's going on here, and I'll talk more about that later too, but that's just a clue, okay? So I'm going to right now show you what a good fuel injector should fire like on my bench mount pressure tester. Okay, I've got a turbo diesel fuel injector, a known good used one. Then we're going to put number 3 and number 5 on the tester and see how they perform. I have my pressure tester all set up. I've got a turbo diesel fuel injector installed. I've got my vent line going outside a window in my shop, and I've made sure that the valve is closed on the tester, and now I'm going to start to pump up pressure. Watch the gauge carefully. This is a turbo diesel, so it should fire right around 1900 to 1950 psi. There's coming up on 1900, 1950. Notice how it fired, a very fine mist. Now listen closely, you'll also hear a little bit of a chatter. So this is a very good firing fuel injector right there. Okay, I'm going to release the pressure now. We'll take this one off, install number 3. All right, if this injector is good, it should do the same thing as the one we previously tested. I'll close the valve. Okay, let's start to bring up pressure. Look what's happening. See that? It's not even holding pressure. So that means it's leaking. It's leaking internally and externally. It's actually leaking through the fuel return hoses. So the whole inside, I can't even get this one to fire. Look at that. It's coming up to about 1400 and it won't even fire. It's all leaking out of these return hose nipples. So that means it's not sealing properly internally inside the fuel injector. This fuel injector is totally shot. That's the first time I've seen one actually behave that way. That was really bad. So we're going to take this one off. Set that one aside. Okay, let's try number 5 now. Okay, here we go. Here comes the pressure, 1,000. Now this one's holding pressure. That's much better. 18, 19, 2,000. Oh, look at that. It's firing at over 2,000 and it's not spraying. Look closely. You're going to see it's just squirting. So this one is literally flooding the engine. And this is really bad for diesel, folks. If you're running your engine with bad fuel injectors, you're washing down the cylinder walls and you're just increasing cylinder wall and piston ring wear, which is the death of these old diesel engines. So, you know, don't neglect your fuel injectors. That's probably one of the best reasons to own one of these testers, not just to rebuild them, but to test them from time to time to make sure they're performing properly. So these two fuel injectors are going to need to be rebuilt or tossed. Then I'm going to take two good injectors, the one I just previously tested, another one, we're going to put them right back into Digby, and you're going to come outside there and we're going to fire that thing up together. Surprise, I bet, surprise. That's quite a bit of rust. It's all rusty on the nozzle. I know some of you already know what's causing all that rust in there, but we're going to discuss that more later. I'm really anxious to see what those two good fuel injectors are going to do for Digby. So, outside I go. Well, let's cross our fingers. I haven't done anything else yet. I haven't tried to start it. I've just replaced these two fuel injectors here. Now, putting the fuel injectors back in is kind of easy, but fighting these injector return hoses is a real pain. You know, having that special injector return hose plier really helps. I didn't replace all the injector return hoses. I just replaced 3. A couple of them that were really bad, really hardened. So this is kind of a temporary thing here, okay? I'm not trying to do everything 100% because we're just trying to determine whether we have a problem that could be solved by just replacing 2 fuel injectors. Let's fire this baby up. Okay, I'm gonna let it run a little bit. It's not running any smoother. Well, looks like it's not improved, okay? Still smoking very heavily in the back. So, what could it be? Stay tuned for part 3, and let's see if we can't revive old Digby here.